Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining. We were really excited. We had such a high interest when I did this webinar about a month ago that we decided to do a take two to let some other folks join in and participate who didn't get a chance. But I'm really excited to talk about this, talk about what we did. We decided to host a series of one-on-one and in-depth interviews with senior folks in research and insights in the verticals where Zeldis, does most of its work. So as many of you know, we focus on insurance and financial services, and we have a couple of kind of practices where we focus. So the first is health insurance. So we spoke to 5 folks who work in health insurance, 5 in P&C insurance, 5 in financial services, which is quite broad, but we do most of our work in sort of the investment, annuity, life insurance, 401k, that space. And then 5 who work in non-medical group benefits like disability, life, voluntary benefits, dental, vision, those kinds of things. There is some overlap here. So I think this adds up to 19, and we talked to 16 people. And that's because some folks work in more than one. Some companies operate in more than one of these areas. So there's 16 companies represented. 11 of them are Fortune 500 companies. So these are pretty big players in the space. Most of the folks we spoke to have 10 to 20 plus years of experience in the research industry, and many of them also with a extensive experience within these industries. So obviously this is qualitative. I do think it yielded some really interesting insights from the insights folks in this space, but it is qualitative and it also is limited to these industries, right? So I think we all, if you are in these industries, know that there could be differences from, say, if I spoke to CPG or tech insights folks. But I think that's part of what makes this valuable. So the first kind of area or topic of conversation that we had with people was about kind of how they're structured. What does their insights and research function look like? What kind of work are they doing? What kind of research are they doing most commonly? And then a little bit around sort of the challenges they're facing and how they're handling those. So what I heard was there is not really a one size fits all approach to the research and insights function and how it's structured within an organization. I will say that there is a trend towards centralization, to having everything under one group of research and insights with a varying degree of success, right? So I think there are a couple of folks who are very siloed, where they sit within product and they sit in different products, and the research function is spread out throughout the organization. And that is not seen as the ideal. They generally are frustrated by that. They think it's very inefficient as a research function. More often, it is centralized. There is a research department. Now, everything isn't always under that. Most often something, for example, like UX sits somewhere else. Maybe it sits in IT or some other, area and is not within the research. But generally speaking, most of the research is in a centralized function. Most often it reports in through marketing, but not always. Sometimes it's through product or strategy, depending on how the organization is organized overall. But the most common is to report in through marketing. There's quite a variety in terms of the size of research and insights departments, ranging from 2 people doing everything to 15 plus people. And while this is somewhat correlated with the size of the company, it isn't always. So sometimes you have 2 people who are the entire research function for a very large company. Not usually the other way around. You don't usually see a smaller company with 15 people, but again, that creates its own challenges in terms of staffing and bandwidth, and what folks can do and how they work. Another sort of, and you all, if you've been anywhere for some amount of time, probably have experienced this, but what we heard is there's a lot of shifts, right? There's a lot of reorgs. If you work for a big corporation, you've probably been through a reorg. So where maybe the research function is centralized and then it's siloed and then it's centralized again, and a new CMO comes in and kind of moves things around. So that in and of itself can be a challenge, that every 4 years, let's say, their whole organization changes and everything gets rearranged. And I can say from the supplier perspective, having some clients I've worked with for 20 plus years, I just see this endless cycle of change. And that, like I said, that can be its own challenge as you're trying to settle in and be effective in your function. In terms of what are the most common types of research being done, and this is like at a very high level, some of the most common things we see in these with the folks in these industries, again at a high level, we'll go a bit deeper on the next slide. Product and concept innovation, right? Testing new concepts, testing new messaging, testing new service areas. This idea of constantly trying to differentiate yourself in a crowded space by having new offerings and testing them. Thought leadership, which is something I would say has become more common in the last 5 to 10 years, where folks want to use research to differentiate their brand. They might be working with their PR, function to do that. Brand and marketing, which has been pretty consistent, always something that's been done. Sometimes sits outside of the rest of the research, but most often is centralized. CX and journey work, again, sometimes CX sits outside of the main research function. Segmentation work, and we're hearing really in the last few years people looking to refresh segments as they feel like there's been a shift in the market and technology and other things. Sales support, because we work in industries where there's agents, brokers, advisors, so helping with those interactions is a common type of research that we're doing. As we get more specific within industry, within the verticals that I mentioned that we work in, I don't know why it's not coming. There we go. So looking at vertical by vertical, and you'll see where there's some things in bold. It's because they cross their themes that we're seeing in different verticals that we work in. But within the health insurance space, a lot of competitive assessments, because in the health insurance market in different states, there might be different competitive sets, and kind of looking at that. Government programs, we've seen a shift towards Medicare and Medicaid within the health insurance space. The use of AI in healthcare, always communications about plans, about benefits, claims work, digital transformation. That's another one that's bold because you'll see it kind of throughout, this idea of servicing through technology, and the impact of that and the advantages of that and some of the drawbacks of that, and kind of testing different things, UX and otherwise, is definitely a big trend. Within the P&C space, a lot around pricing and profitability, especially with issues with the environmental impact and things, and how do we offer something in areas that are prone to flood or what have you, and kind of working through that pricing and profitability. Customer segments and demographics. And when I talk about that, it's often like age, right, generation, and how there's differences there, or in just certain subsets of the population. Again, digital transformation, and that's both from the consumer side in personal lines P&C, but also with agents and brokers and quoting tools and how things claims tools. Innovation and R&D, offering new products and services to help be more profitable in the space. And lately, a little bit around the impact of tariffs, especially in the commercial P&C market. Financial services, a lot around market volatility and economic uncertainty these days, and products that kind of fit that need or that gap. Again, customer segments and demographics, differences by age, etc. Again, digital transformation, really important in the financial services space. Again, both from a consumer, retail investor, but also from the advisor's perspective and how they're servicing their clients and doing their research. Financial education and literacy, alternatives as a type of investment with advisors is been a trend, and AI more so far with advisors, may end up being with consumers as well, but kind of how advisors are seeing AI, using AI, again, how it's affecting how they work with their clients. And then finally, in the group benefit space, this first one says technology versus human touch, but it also relates to that digital transformation, right? How do we service folks using technology, but keep that human touch when you have things like disability claims and so forth that really need a human element. Mental health in the workplace, this has become really important in the group benefit space, supporting employers changing workplace demographics. So again, what Gen Z employees are like might be different than what Gen X employees are like. Integrating claims across different products and voluntary benefits. So that's a lot, and everyone on this call probably operates in a different space here, but hopefully you each got something that was valuable and relevant to you. Everything else for the rest of the presentation is probably going to be more at a high level. But I want to talk next about some of the challenges that folks face within the insights. And this could be, more broadly for any insights organization and not just insurance and financial services, but that's who we spoke to. So let's look at what people talked about as the greatest challenges they're facing. The number one that we heard from nearly everyone was budget. Of everyone we spoke to, only one person has an increasing budget this year as compared to last year. Every other person we spoke to had either a flat or decreasing budget. And if you have a flat budget, it doesn't mean folks don't want more research or they want less research. No, no, no. They want more research. They want to hear more. They want more data. They want more information, but you've got a flat or decreasing budget. So kind of struggling and finding ways to do more with less. We'll talk about AI because that certainly fits in here. Demonstrating ROI and value, always a challenge in an insight space, right? It's a cost center, right? It's not a profit center. So finding ways to demonstrate what you're contributing to the organization is really important. Demonstrating your value to senior leadership, staffing and bandwidth. So small departments, again, not a lot of budget, still need to get a lot done. Balancing speed and quality. So finding ways to do things quickly because the expectation is to have it done very quickly, immediately, and balancing that with having, good, rigorous and quality research. And compliance, especially in, financial services and especially in health insurance, that can be a big issue, right? Compliance, I mentioned Medicare, Medicaid. If you work in government markets, everything needs to be approved. It can take months. I mean, it can be a huge, huge barrier or hurdle to getting research done. So, how are folks dealing with these challenges? What are they doing? How are they finding solutions to still do effective research and contribute to their company's decision making? So, data
Hey,
analytics.
Amy,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
real
Brad.
quick, I have
Sure.
a question. Sorry to interrupt.
Great.
Are you
No,
seeing budgets more on the side of flat or more decreasing?
we saw more flat than decreasing. So I would say, okay, one person we spoke to out of 16 had increasing. Then we probably had four decreasing and then the remainder flat. So more like probably twice as many flat as decreasing, but still like a lot of decreasing. Hopefully that's helpful. And that was across industries. So we didn't see like more in one industry than the other. It wasn't like, oh, health is the one that's decreasing and everybody. It was pretty consistent across. The one that was increasing was P&C. So the one person who had an increasing budget was in the P&C space for whatever that's worth. Okay. So and Brad, definitely interrupt me because I can't see as people are putting in questions, and I definitely want to answer them while
Yeah,
we're still
well,
doing that.
do I actually have a follow-up?
Okay.
What about hiring budgets and which industry?
Yeah, so hiring along with that. So we're seeing a lot of limitations on increasing staff size. So we're not seeing like more positions, more opening. Not, I would say two or three of the folks, the 16 that we spoke to, had a position or had hired a position in the previous year, but most were being asked to do everything they needed to do with the same amount of people, and they were not in a position to be able to grow their team, which we're going to talk about in a little bit because that, again, it's bandwidth and staffing and how do you keep doing what everybody needs when you don't have the team members to do that? So yeah, budget and kind of staffing went hand in hand there. Okay. So in terms of solving the challenges, a couple of the people we spoke to, not a ton, but a handful, mentioned an increased focus on data analytics as a way to answer questions, get insights, make decisions right? So instead of primary market research where you're collecting data, using the data that already exists within the organization and leveraging that data and building tools to mine that data as a focus, as kind of away from primary market research and more internal towards data analytics. Now, I will also caveat this by saying we had one person who had maybe 3 years ago a trend towards this in in their organization, and then realized it didn't work, right? It wasn't enough, and there was still a call for more research, and so they kind of pivoted back towards more primary. So kind of hearing two things there. But it is something that people are looking at more, and I think maybe AI is opening up some doors here because maybe it opens up an opportunity to leverage internal data in a way that it couldn't be leveraged before, and bringing different tools to the table. Again, all in the exploratory stage at this point, but definitely something that came up. Quick and dirty. I'm hearing that folks are finding tools, finding vendors that allow them to execute research very quickly, but maybe not as rigorously in terms of sample data quality and who you're talking to, but being able to get some answers really fast. And so this is a solution, but it's a solution that comes with what I heard kind of another problem, and that is this is great in certain situations. You don't always need the most rigorous methodology and sample. But when your internal business partners get used to quick and dirty, they get used to getting an answer in a couple days or a week, they expect it at all times. And so then when you do have a study or an effort where you do really need more high quality, rigorous work for critical decisions, we're going to launch this product, important big stuff where you want to make sure you have the best data you can have, folks aren't as patient, right? They're like, why is this going to take 8 weeks? We did the other one in 2 days. Like, I don't understand. So it's a solution, but it's important. What I heard was it's important to balance those expectations and to kind of set the stage like, no, 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 this time we need to take a more rigorous approach, and here's why. So just something to think about. Probably one of the most common solutions we're hearing to some of the things I mentioned on the previous slide are internal communities. Pretty much everyone has some kind of internal community at this point, different levels, different, some have it with every audience, some have huge ones, some have small sort of forums. But for the most part, everybody has some kind of internal resource, community of sample of audience that they can go to on a repeated basis on a relatively fast, can get answers fast. And that can be cost effective, right? Because you can go back to them over and over again. They've been recruited once. So that is something that's sort of helping solve for some of the budget issues as well as some of the kind of speed requirements that people are looking for. It has its own challenges, and it needs to be managed in a way that, is cost effective. Trust me, I've seen folks invest a lot of money in an internal community and, not use it as effectively as they could, but it is definitely a solution that some folks are leveraging really, really well. I mentioned demonstrating ROI as a challenge. Well, folks are demonstrating value, and on the next slide, I'm gonna talk about some of the ways that they're doing that. And then AI tools. Again, the biggest thing I'm hearing is that related to budget, we have to use AI to make everything cheaper. But we're going to talk about AI and some of the issues with that in a few slides. So let me touch on demonstrating ROI and how people are doing that. I have some quotes here on the screen of people talking about how they're demonstrating ROI. So first thing is measurements and metric, right? Quantifying what you're doing, and kind of tying to the second one, calculating the money you are somehow contributing to the bottom line, whether that's retention, right? Tying some of your satisfaction metrics and loyalty metrics with retention and how that is then translating into saved money, or cross-selling, or a new product that you tested and how successful that is, being able to tie the data from your research to money that impacts your company's bottom line. And so some folks are doing that. It's not easy, but folks are working on that. I mentioned, and the quote, I think the third quote here, have a big internal community that they invested a lot of money to build. And now every time they do a study with that community, they calculate how much it would cost as an ad hoc study if they had done it, independently and add all that money up so that they're showing that this is worth it and this is saving money for the company to do it this way. Communicating, disseminating, right? Sharing out the data, making sure it's activated, making sure folks are using it and knowing how to use it. Kind of tied with that, providing the data, self-service data for stakeholders so they can go on it and look at it themselves, right? So those things, having folks be able to see the data, use the data to make decisions, it's a little more indirect, but it demonstrates the value, right? It makes people really value that data and know how important that data is and want to make sure they're getting that data consistently over time. And all of that is demonstrating the value of the research function. This does tie into something that I heard a little bit about in these interviews, and I'm calling it the catch-22 of success, right? Being demonstrating your value as a research function. So doing that successfully, showing people that what you're doing is important and it's helping the organization, it's driving things forward. That's great. That makes people want more research. Oh, what you're doing is so important, it's so valuable. I want more of this. Now we can do this and this and this, and I'm going to get all this data and it's going to be great, but your budget's flat and you can't hire anyone. So you have to keep somehow do more because you're so great, but do it with the same or fewer resources. And that is something I heard. Here's just a quote, and I'll just read it. We haven't grown in terms of team size, but we're working with more people. The more people we work with, the more people hear about us, the more people see our work, the more people come to us with questions and different things they want our help with. So this was an organization of two people, and they're still two people, but now they're getting more and more demand and more people want work. So, there needs to be, there's a need to not only demonstrate ROI, but demonstrate our own ROI in a way that makes a case for a higher budget or more staff or more resources. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there for some people. I'm just going to pause in case Brad, nothing. Okay. Um, let's talk about trends. I have three on this page. But we already talked about data analytics. We're not going to talk about that again. We're going to talk about AI and we're going to talk about data quality. Those were the two things that we heard most often, most consistently. So let's talk a little bit about AI because I'm sure you haven't heard nearly enough about AI in the past year or so. We're going to talk a little bit more about it. Uh, every single person we spoke to mentioned AI as the top trend in the industry and a game changer. And they are not wrong. I think our industry is going to be forever changed by AI. I think our jobs and everything we do is going to be changed. This quote, AI obviously comes up a lot. It was interesting because we went to TMRE a couple of years ago, and what I was hearing from others is I don't want to sit in another session about AI because at that point in time, it was a lot of theory. There weren't a lot of use cases. But since then, obviously, it's gained a lot more traction. There are use cases. Everybody attaches AI to their product offerings. So what I'm hearing, what I heard is that AI is out there, and now it's actually out there in a way that people are using it and using it successfully and being able to leverage it in research in different ways. And so we need to be thinking about this and we need to be on top of this, and we can't fall behind on this because it is changing our industry.
Hey, Amy, it's Brad.
Yes.
A question on which tools are popular, if that was discussed, Chat GPT, Copilot, Azure.
In AI
Yeah,
specifically? Yeah,
yeah.
I'm gonna talk a little bit about that. So
Okay.
I'm gonna touch on that, yeah, and
Very
how
good.
people are using it and yeah. So in the next I think it's the next slide is I'm gonna talk about that. If I
Uh,
still didn't answer someone's question, please follow up.
okay. Sounds good.
So tied with this, the other thing I heard very consistently is everyone felt like that their company and the industry in general is behind on AI. Their industry, right? Insurance and financial services. That's what we're talking about. So, and I'll pull up this quote. I think some other industries are embracing AI much faster than, in this case, financial services. I get worried because I'm like, they're going to be dinosaurs if I can't get them these tools and they can't get permission to use them. I think financial services is literally going to be behind the curve. I've also talked to others in the insurance industry, and they're having the same problem. We're so concerned with governance. And so this is a very consistent theme, more for financial services and health insurance than for P&C, but a very consistent theme around we're behind because we have more compliance issues, because we're more cautious, because we're scared of this. So I'll say a couple of things. One, very well, the insurance and financial services insights industry may be behind on AI. Like I think that's true. They're not behind each other. I think everyone, talking to everyone, and we'll talk on the next page about what people are and aren't doing, but it's pretty similar, right? Nobody I talk to, and I talk to some, really big corporations, is really ahead, is really like, 10 steps ahead of anybody else. Everybody's kind of in the same place, even the PNC space, which doesn't have as many of the compliance issues, but it's just a more conservative sort of industry in general. So not behind each other, but yes, perhaps behind in the industry. The other thing that I heard very consistently, and I actually heard this even again from someone else, not in these interviews that I ran into it at Quirks New York a couple weeks ago, was who's in charge of sort of compliance for their research function, and it's a very big company, very big research function, financial services. And he said, and I heard it in these interviews as well, is we're getting two messages. We've got CEOs and CFOs saying, you've got to use AI. We got to take advantage of this and we've got to incorporate it and we're going to save money with it, right? You have to be leveraging it. What are we doing? How are we staying ahead? And then you've got compliance saying, no, 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 no. You cannot do this, right? There's privacy issues like PHI, PII, and just all sorts of legal and so you've got this push and pull when it comes to AI for corporations in general, and then that's filtering down to the research and insights function. So that is a current sort of barrier or challenge is we know we need to be using this, and a lot our leadership is pushing us to use it, but we're being handcuffed and we're not being able to use it in the way that we want to. So that kind of sets the stage. I'm going to talk about kind of how it is being used from what I heard, including sort of what tools specifically. So right now, internally in these organizations, research functions very sparingly, but everybody's planning to do more. So what are they doing right now? And I think both of these things, Brad, you mentioned Copilot. That is what I'm hearing the most. We have Copilot. We have our own version of it. We either have Copilot or we have some internal version of Copilot that was created, or it's Copilot like that's a closed system that's only internal. Even that, even some companies that have Copilot, only some people can use it. There's still restrictions on it, and some people can't use Copilot yet. So that's the most common that I heard. Probably from at least 2/3 of people are using Copilot or some form of Copilot. ChatGPT is the other one that I'm hearing most common, but very cautiously and in a very limited way, right? I can use it for ideas. I can use it to tell me things. I can't tell it anything, but I can use it to like help me. How would you write a question on this? Or if I was writing a survey on this, what question should I ask? Or can you reframe this question, at a third grade reading level? So using it for things like that as sort of like a language assistant, a brainstorming tool, that's happening. Secondary research, so using it for like competitive intelligence searches, like what are other companies doing, using ChatGPT and similar for that. Some mention it being used in other areas of the company, like claims and like in customer service, but not in research. A less than a third of the folks I spoke to are actually using it for things like coding or summarizing qualitative transcripts, right? That's a couple people are doing that, but most people have not gotten to the point where that is approved. So that's how they're using it. How they want to be using it, what they're looking in. Oh, I should mention one company is using AI personas or has tested where they've created a persona of an audience that they can then, that's like basically like a robot version of their audience that they can then ask questions of and gather data, but it has not been, it hasn't worked. It's not been reliable. It's not giving them what they would like to see. So they haven't done anything with it. They're still in the experimental stages. Um, so they're still looking at some, still just at the point where they're still investigating coding and data summarization, right? Haven't even gotten there yet. Reporting is something else folks are looking into. Synthetic data and twinning, so creating like a data set that mirrors a real data set, but it's AI, so you can use it ongoing, which is tied to personas, right? Like creating synthetic respondents, basically. And that's where one person has tested it and has not seen good results, but other people are investigating it and reading papers and going to webinars and learning about it. And moderating, interviewing and moderating is something else folks are looking into. It's something we're looking into ourselves. I also want to, on top of all of this, so again, it's like nascent stages, right? We're just mostly just exploring it. But nobody is controlling what their suppliers are doing with AI. So when I ask, well, what about your supplier? Are your suppliers using AI with your data on your studies? What I generally heard was it's like a don't ask, don't tell. Like we want to see it leveraged. So if they're leveraging it, great, even though we can't. And I will just say from a supplier perspective, we have about 50 active clients. Two have put anything into a contract MSA addendum about AI. Two out of 50 have put any restrictions on our ability to use AI. So I mean, we have our own policy that we won't use it all willy-nilly, but like I'll just say that there's a disconnect between internal compliance and what companies are allowed to do internally and what they're sort of not regulating their suppliers and doing with AI. For whatever that's worth, maybe nobody cares, but I'm just putting it out there. Um, Obviously, in terms of like why do people want to use AI, we've already kind of talked about it. There's a perception that it'll be faster when more efficient, that will lower costs, and that will help with bandwidth, right? It's going to take some of the stuff off our plate. I don't have to read through transcripts. I don't have to do all that. It's faster and it frees up my time to do other things. And when you have a small staff and low bandwidth, that's really, really important. So very clear what the value is for people. I mean, I saw a presentation at Quirks, and I want to say it was Microsoft talking about how they've done AI qual with AI moderating, and they did like 300 interviews in 2 days, qualitative interviews, and it cost, two-thirds of what it would cost. So, I mean, the potential advantages are very clear. I mean, obviously there's caveats and a lot of unknowns, but I think everyone understands what the potential value is.
Hey, Amy,
Concern,
real
yeah,
quick.
please.
I'll read the question here. I'm not sure. What vendors are they using synthetic data?
I don't know. So for the one company that was using the synthetic data for the personas, I don't know what vendor they used that they were trying it out with. I did not get that information. So sorry, I can't answer that specifically.
Thank you.
Sure. Um, the concerns are also, I think, pretty obvious, right? Data security and privacy, especially in industries that really rely on data security and have to worry about PII and PHI. Reliability, so bias, hallucinations, sort of the AI loop of feeding itself, if that's all you're going back to. And that's where I think the synthetic data and the personas, that needs to be dealt with for that to be effective. Jobs. I think we're all worried about what it means for our jobs. Are we all just going to be AI monitors in 10 years? Like, I don't have the answer to that, but that's certainly something that things people are worried about. I also think, and Zeldis, for anybody who's interested, we're doing some research on research where we're going to be looking at AI moderating and what it can and can't do. Kind of what are the situations where it works really well and where are the limitations. So I do think kind of testing those limits of where AI can be really helpful and where maybe it's not the best approach. We've used it for like probing on open ends on quant. Like there's testing out those tools and understanding where it can really work and where maybe people are getting a little ahead of themselves and it isn't the best approach. And I think that's going to change, right? That's going to evolve over time, and we need to kind of keep up on that. But I will be, I'm sure, doing a webinar in the next, 3 or 6 months about the work that we're doing now and kind of testing out moderating. Um, I mentioned this already on the last slide, so they're not basically this is what I was saying about how it's not being regulated through vendors. I will say, and I actually am probably I'm going to co-sponsor a webinar with Civicom. Civicom has an AI. They're a qualitative research platform, and they have Quillet is their AI tool, and I used Quillet for this, right? So when I did these interviews, I very extensively used Quillet to pull out some of the findings and to summarize some things and look at different things. And so I'm planning to co-sponsor with Civicom a talk just walking through a case study of how I did this with these interviews and how I used it. So just for future reference, it was really, really helpful. I mean, it was really helpful. So AI definitely can do some of the more time consuming tasks really, really well. And if you've moderated, then you can check for hallucination. It's really easy because you know what's accurate and what's not. Okay, we're gonna pivot. We're gonna talk about data quality. My husband sent me this cartoon the other day, and yeah, I love Calvin and Hobbes, but I just thought it was really funny, and spoke to the fact that I was going to talk about data quality, so I threw it in here. We all have always, known that data quality can be an issue when we're working with panel sample, when we're pulling, and I think over time it's just gotten worse and worse, and AI has contributed to making it an issue. But are the people we're speaking to really the people we think they are? Are they really giving us their time and attention? You know, it's an issue. So it's something that came up a lot. I have a quote here: sample quality has been my biggest nightmare. And anyone who knows me knows this is my soapbox as well, because I definitely I feel like we built this amazing thing called online panels and then we burnt it to the ground by treating it really, really badly. And now we're in a really bad place. So some of the problems, panel data, just not, you're just not getting the people you think you're getting in a lot of cases. We've commoditized it to the point where we just wanted it really cheap, and now it's kind of a mess. There's bots, there's AI. I think, it's garbage in, garbage out, as we all know. And with a lot of panels, if you're actively cleaning the data, like really looking at all of, traps and verbatims and everything, you could be throwing out 50% of what you're collecting. And that is super concerning. It's concerning for like what's left, what's like the 50% that's still in there. I was talking to a client yesterday, and it's funny because it used to be we would read through the verbatims and we would throw out really bad quality open ends, right? Just this is terrible. This is like a bunch of characters, or they're just saying nonsense. Now, when we're cleaning, we're throwing out the best verbatims. Because if you've got an open end where someone gave you all the reasons and there's a bulleted list, you're like, no, that's AI. That's not a human. So I just think it's funny that now we are like reading through to find two good verbatims to throw out. I think we have some folks have unreasonable expectations of feasibility and what you can get on a panel, how many you can get of a particular audience. If you come to me and you say you want 1,000 financial advisors who sell annuities, I'm gonna like raise an eyebrow because I'm gonna be like, I can get you that, but you don't want that. Like it's too many, and the data quality is not going to be good if someone tells you can get that, or if someone tells you they can get agents and brokers who sell PNC for, $10 a pop. Don't buy that. Like there's just certain, you just need to be really careful about what you're getting. And I think, especially, and I think this is true no matter what, because you're making business decisions and you want to make sure you're talking to the right people. But I think, especially when it comes to thought leadership, if you're putting your brand on something and you're putting it out into the world, you really need to make sure the data quality is good, is there. I think, there are solutions, there are things to help with this. When we heard what we heard from people, I mentioned the internal communities, and that's the biggest way a lot of folks are dealing with this is if I vet these people, if I pull them into a community, I know who they are. I don't have to worry. I don't have to worry they're AI. I don't have to worry they're not who they say they are. Doing more qualitative because you're very quickly, if you're moderating an interview with someone, if you know that they're not who they're supposed to be. So qualitative has taken on a bigger role for some folks. Using vetted panels and sources, and I've talked to a lot of people about this. We've started to narrow our panel partners to folks who are doing vetting and cleaning and making sure that they're um, maximizing, optimizing the quality of their data. And then being more realistic about what you can get. Convincing your business partners that 300 is stable, they don't need 1,000. 300 who are the right people are better than 1,000 that are not, right? Um, yeah. I'm just going to pause in case.
Uh,
Brad, I
I'm
thought I heard you
sorry.
first.
Yes, there is another question. Do you have a list of vetted panels?
Yes, reach out to me after. I have a couple panels. There's a variety, right? So we have some panel partners that we don't work with. Then we have some that are like they do a really good job cleaning and they have a really good job of detecting fraud and getting rid of those people. And I kind of call that the middle because at least they're screening out the garbage. That's different though than the last group, which is the group that like validates who's on their panel and gets some sort of external information on them or licensing or gets a cell phone if they're a consumer. So there's a range. I don't really want to like be calling out specific companies here and like endorsing some and not others. But if you reach out to me individually, I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to have a conversation or just over email, kind of give you my thoughts and for different audiences as well.
And
Um,
Amy, there's
yeah,
already interest in your webinar with Civicom, so I'll go ahead
cool.
and answer it. Yes, we will be sending you information on that
You were
as
on the
well.
list for
So,
this one. You'll be on the list for
yeah,
that one for sure. So keep an eye out.
indeed.
Um, awesome. Okay. So the last thing that we talked about, I called it the selfish part of the interview when I talked to these folks, and that was what they look for in a partner like Zeldis or anyone else, right? What's important to them when they're dealing with a supplier. And honestly, this, not surprisingly, was competitive intelligence for us. It was important for us to know, but I will share it out with you. And I will say, I didn't say this at the beginning. Not everyone we spoke to was like a Zeldis client. I mean, there certainly were Zeldis clients, but there were also folks who were not. So it wasn't like so skewed to just our client base. But the things we heard were trust, industry expertise, like output, right? Storytelling and communication, how they communicate results, cost, speed and agility, and quality. Those were all kind of the top things. A few respondents, not great news for us, but a few respondents mentioned a declining need for outside partners moving forward, depending on if they're doing internal communities, if they're using data analytics, or just other internal tools, that they might need partners less. So not what we wanted to hear, but I'm sharing it with you because it's what we heard. And then I'm just going to put up, again, for anybody who had a question that I didn't answer in this webinar, please feel free to email me. Love talking about this stuff. It was really, really interesting to hear all of this and interesting to see kind of what the issues are right now and kind of how people are dealing with them. Thank you. Thanks, Brad. Thanks, everybody.